So just a quick recap while you're all here. So 6 weeks ago we had our September 25th event, and this is our follow-on Q&A. Apologies that a little bit of time has elapsed between then and now. That's just based on availability and get everyone on together. We did the same back in the summer. If you can remember that far back, we had our event in June, and then we did a Q&A in July. And my recollection is that I began that Q&A with some rather pointy questions to hopeful to find some Australian colleagues in the audience, because we were doing rather well in the cricket at that point. So what we've got on stage here is the world's #1 South African rugby fan. We're going to move on from that without any discussion, and the less said about the cricket the better, so we can dive into today's session. So just quick intros for everyone. You've got Bob Verber, Sean, Ruan, Alvaro, who you all met and you all heard from at the event in September. We're going to cover a variety of questions around build, around adoption, what we've done as per the last Q&A that we did. Lots of good questions that have come in. We would have to sit here until next week to go through them point by point. So what the team have done is they've been through all those, grouped them together, and what the guys will take you through is consolidated feedback around the themes that have emerged, and of course then we can extend that discussion in the room today with any questions that you might want to raise. In the room, in addition to the guys you've got on stage, we've got some Velinetic colleagues dotted around. We've also got some members of the Blueprint 2 engagement team, so we can fire questions around and we can do a number of bits and bobs. We'll just set the scene for you a little bit. Bob, maybe if you want to take us through.
Yeah, it feels like I need to stand up if I do this.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Similar to what we talked about in September, we remain on track in terms of the build and the Blueprint 2 roadmap. We're aligned with those timelines and milestones, which will pop up in a moment. That remains just moving ahead with speed. The 2 of the 5 sequences have been delivered, so global claims and settlement, and we've been testing those as we go. We, in line with what we said before, will do the market cutover July 1st for phase 1. That's a low complexity change for you all. I would say the complexity actually is with Velinetic there, and then we'll move to phase 2 September 1st. And as it says here, we focused on adoption. That's something that Matt and I have been busy with and rolling along with. We have a number of work streams there, mostly focused on testing and training and onboarding and the support around that, which we'll also talk a little bit about. And that support includes the adoption guide. I think we're on version 2 now that's been published, training materials, partner support, engagement support, and testing and onboarding support as well. Maybe to go to the next one, the roadmap, or it's a little bit our version of the tube map. I think you're probably all familiar with this. Again, no changes. I should think here, the key dates I would say are the first market training material that was put up onto the Velinetic website on November 1st. So if you haven't done so already, please take a look, download it, start to get familiar with it and see the changes that are coming and how you can start to adopt your firms accordingly. The other key date I would say is the Vanguard testing, where, we've been having Vanguard testing taking place in the past. We get that started in earnest this month on phase 2 and sequence 2, and sequence 3 will be in early Q1, January or early February, where we'll get started on sequence 3. And then the other key date I would say is the phase 1, which is July 1st, where sequence 3, 4, and 5 will be up and running. And then before that, we'll be making available to the market as a whole customer testing on or around April 1st, where you can start to dig in yourself and do self-service testing that we'll have available. And we're looking at an additional model where we can provide some extra support, probably with a commercial wrap around that.
I suppose we always put this slide up. What does it mean for me, I think, is probably the question that you're asking yourself. So when we've met and had events before, the questions have been very much at these three guys, talking technically about what's being built, questions around how will this work, how will that work, is this included, that's not included. We're still doing lots of that. We'll move through some of that today. But of course, the key message from the event that we held in September was that we've now at a point on the program where we've reached a level of maturity where we escalate adoption of all the things that are being built alongside the completion of the build. So our two major objectives are build completion, which is sort of still on track, as Bob said. We're in pretty good shape on that. All the markers that we use against progress, all the markers that we use against hitting our milestones are continue to be delivered. There's a lot of questions still, continue to ask them. If we've got the answers for them, we'll give it you straight away. If we need to go and find them, we'll go and find them for you. If you're sitting on a burning question, which is specific to your firm, let's have it. We can answer it today. We'll certainly have a best shot. If we don't have the answer, we'll come back to you with it. So don't feel like there's a piece of information or a risk that your firm's running that you've not asked us. Just get it out there. And then adoption. So really how we sort of bring the first half of next year together and actually link all the pieces. So we take from build completion through training, through testing, and then through the final go live bit and how we dovetail all of those activities together. That's really where the program is at right now. It's interesting. I depend on what audience I'm in when I talk about phase one and I talk about phase two. Phase one, the launch of the digital services within the Valonetic team. Phase two, the launch of the markets, digital integration with those services. Both are major milestones. I mean, Bob's right. In aggregate, phase one is a really heavy lift. It's a particularly difficult challenge to the Valonetic team internally as they switch on those services and operationally you have a sense of what that means for them. In aggregate, it's a big piece for the market for sure. Firm by firm, it should not be an enormous lift. I mean, there is complexity there. There's work to do with vendors, there's work on new portals, there's work on messaging. But I think what I'd say in terms of phase one now, the adoption guide that we put out, I think in September actually, so it's been out there for a few weeks right now, is a real goldmine of information. We've got some final bits of technical information to share. Alvaro can provide an update on some of those things today. But phase one, I think we're in a pretty decent shape. Phase two, available from September or October 1, I think is the date that we'll be shooting for on that. Again, on track. That means from a technical perspective, the gateway goes live and the actual end-to-end solution will be available. That's not a market event, as we've said a number of times. That means that the capability is available to you. I mean, to be confirmed exactly where we land on it, but direction of travel is that we'll shoot for something like a 24-month window where we would hope to get the majority of the market using phase two services, and in that 24 months window, we would provide a sort of variety of support and incentivization to help you get on board with it in a way which kind of timescale that works for your firm. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, the QA focus areas were timeline readiness, some technical details, some talk on vendor readiness, which I guess actually links back to some technical details, testing and training, contractual costs. Bob can cover the latter, and I think we'll just do a variety of the panel here and may even tap into the audience for some updates with people we've got around. And then just one final point before we go into the Q&A. There is a huge amount of information out there. So all of this based in two primary areas, all feeding off a single source, which is the Valonetic website. Within the Valonetic website, there's a specific Blueprint 2 area. In that area, we've got lots and lots of information. All of the stuff that was previously hosted on Lloyd's Blueprint 2 has been moved over into that area. You'll see all of our guides, any collateral materials that we produced were there. And what we've also launched as of November the 1st was Valonetic's Training Hub. So the initial Training Hub materials are out there, and what you'll see is those developed over the coming weeks and months with more specific, more detailed information, giving you everything that you need in regards to training and where we're going to be on testing. So everything is out there, and I would say it's really at the risk of sort of teaching grandma how to suck eggs. It's not a question of reviewing those materials, it's a question of going through them in detail with the right people in your firm. So the adoption guide, have you been through with tech leads, digital leads, ops leads, the people that control, if you've got offshore or middle and back office services, have you had those discussions trying to bring it live for your firm? That's where I think the true value of those materials is. And of course, if those sessions raise questions, we're available to help you in any way that we can. So we'll dive perhaps.
I was going to say, Matt, just real quick on the contractual piece. I'll just hit some of the highlights just now, and then we can fill in some stuff as we go. So what we've done is it's actually now known as the Digital Processing Services Agreement, or DPSA, affectionately. I would say we've spent more than a year in some really good, hard-fought, in the best sense of the word, negotiations with the market associations, really collaborative effort in terms of what we've been able to produce. I would say it's a very fair and balanced contract that's come out for everybody. That is currently being reviewed by an LMA customer panel and an IUA customer panel with some select customers where we're getting their feedback. The plan is that we will issue that to the market, make it available to the market for signature as of January of this coming year. That will include all the services, the service catalog, the pricing as well, and there will also be accompanying a what's called a termination letter, because as you know, we have the current contract that's in place, also known as FERN, and we'll be sunsetting that so we can do the cutover that'll be associated with signing the DPSA and then the cutover of the services on July 1st. So that's all coming in process. Yeah.
Sorry, just a question. All the association you can only get formal t-shirts, we can get something with the service catalog pricing.
For the market?
Yeah.
I don't think any of those dates have changed, have they, Bob?
Yeah, the dates haven't changed on that part. So there's the customer panel that's looking at all this. We're getting the feedback from them on that. And what will be available for the associations and us to be going through, looking through, and also getting feedback from the customer panel is the actual pricing. So far we've got the commercial principles agreed, and we're still working and finalizing the pricing now. So that's something that we'll be doing before January.
Folks, if you have a question, can you just pop up your hands so we can bring a microphone so everybody can hear what's being asked?
And I would also ask in advance if you guys say your name and what firm you're from too, that helps.
It really helps as well because everything's been recorded, so it just makes everything much more useful in the feedback. Okay, so into the Q&A. So guys, perhaps if I look to Sean, Tarun and Alvaro to begin with, where do you want to go with this? So you guys have done some work and sort of collected questions together. Do you want to sort of roll through that? And then we can take questions as they occur, because I think it's a really good sort of narrative that you guys have put together.
Yeah. You want to start with maybe build and then we go EDIs and...
Yeah.
Can we?
Sounds good.
Do we do timelines or?
Very good.
Do we need, can everyone hear me?
Yeah, your mic will pick
Can we
up
pick
all
up
that.
there?
Yeah,
Okay.
what are you going to do?
So this might not be as interactive as we hoped it would be. So in terms of build, so we are in PI 11 of 13 PIs. So the end of PI 13 sees the completion of Gateway, and the end of PI 12 sees the code completion of sequences 3 and 4. So we're in PI 11 at the moment. There's a significant amount of analysis ongoing. 3 in a box is working really well. All the associations are playing their part in terms of finding us experts where we need them. They will actually come to an end probably in the middle of Q1 next year, because all the analysis at that point will be complete. And then it will be a case of us just sort of burying away under the covers and getting that code actually deployed. We've had some really good interactions with the Vanguard group recently, and maybe I'll ask Bob to talk about that a bit later. They are going to be our sort of frontline test unit, and at the moment, as Bob said, they're looking at sequence 2. We're looking now at the plan for sequence 3 and 4, when that... we don't want to wait for all that code to be there, because obviously that doesn't give us any advantage, but we're going to drip feed code through to the Vanguard team, and so we're working out what scenarios, what areas of functionality can be tested as early as possible so that we can start to get that underway. In terms of delegated authority, it's probably worth touching on that. So that's now, we've got delegated authority as a concept, so that's now, we spoke to you about that in September. We're now working with Lloyds and the associations, particularly around the cover holder and third-party access. So one of the bits of feedback that we got from you was that this needs to be implemented in a controlled manner, and we completely agree. Opening our brand new shiny systems up to hundreds of thousands of cover holders could potentially put us in a worse place rather than giving us benefit. So what we're doing with associations and Lloyds is to look at how we can implement that, that additional functionality in a really controlled manner. So maybe looking at a reduced number of cover holders to begin with, and having the proper governance around that to make sure that it's benefit and not organised chaos, which it could well have been if we'd unleashed it. That being done over the next couple of weeks. And so we should have something to share in terms of a proof of concept or a pilot with you as to how we get that cover holder access. It's one of the biggest changes to what we have today. So the systems today, as you know, are really limited to brokers and carriers. There are a few third parties sort of scattered in and around. But this sort of mass access for cover holders to be self-sufficient is one of the biggest changes. So we need to make sure that we manage that. We manage that carefully, and that we're working with LIBA as well on the broking side, because there's a lot of nerves around brokers and how we work together from a cover holder broker perspective. When we look at the list of questions that we get from you, we get consistently, are we on track? Yes. What happens if the whole market isn't ready on the 1st of July? That is obviously a concern. This is a full cutover program. So we've said it before, the nature of what we're doing is taking the entire mainframe as it stands today and turning that off and replacing it with something new. We cannot have anything stranded on that mainframe application in order to move into the new world. So it is 100% of business has to go from old to new at the same time. So we've done some surveys, and I'm going to forget the numbers now, Bob, I don't know if you've got them. We're in the 70% mark in terms of people that are confident that they'll be ready. And I would ask you to engage your EC teams if you have concerns. There is support we can give you if you're unsure who to ask the questions to. Go to your EC3 reps or come directly to us. And we can actually help you in terms of getting ready for that 1/7 cutover. The other thing is EDIs. So EDIs, we talk about, we've got minimal change. We don't want lots and lots of change, particularly around messaging. So EDIs will remain as they are. We're in the process of reviewing all of the EDI specs, and this is probably a good time for me to just get Alvaro to come and pop up to you to talk about not just pure EDIs, but our plan for bespoke as well.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Can I just jump in 1 second from a build perspective? 2 other items I just want to cover quickly from a build perspective is when we spoke to you in September, I did speak to you guys about a process flow and using a process flow to show you how we're progressing with build. That is underway. We are working on that right now. We're working with Boston Consulting Group, forgot the acronym for a second. As soon as that's ready, we will be publishing that on G4, so you guys can see exactly what's been built from a process perspective, what's still to be built from a process perspective. Along with that, we'll also publish from a standard EDI perspective, the standard EDI specs. We already published version 1 of those, as Sean just mentioned. Version 2, we're going through a revision of that right now, taking on board the feedback from the last session over here, especially Advantage Go. Not spotting you in the room, Richard, but took some feedback over there that they weren't quite lined up. So we're working through that to make sure that they are lined up. And we'll also then publish exactly when we're going to be building those EDI specifications, just to give you another layer of transparency and clarity on what's being built when, to give you a bit more confidence that we are on track and that we are delivering according to our schedules.
Yeah, sounds good. So before we open the floor to general questions, I'll give 2 high-level updates, and then we can dive into the details depending on the questions on 2 areas that we have discussed in previous sessions. So one of them is bespoke EDIs, and then the other one would be prop treaty. So on bespoke EDIs, as you might remember, standard EDIs are fully within scope of the work. That's what Shan and Ruan were discussing about. Technical specs have been released, they're being revised, and that is underway. Bespoke EDIs, as you remember, there's more than 130 or more variations of customizations of EDI mappings to certain customers in the market. For the last few months, the market has requested, hey, can we have some of these most important bespoke EDIs included in scope? Most notably is the Accord for All family, where we transform EDI messages into an XML format that looks like an Accord message. In the last few months, our teams have analyzed all of the different customizations that we have, and we have a proposal where, based on number of customers registered to use that custom message, volumes of LPANs and transactions, gross written premium, because of course not all transactions are created equal, and finally, complexity of the customization. We have come up with a list of 39 bespoke mappings that we think is the ideal candidate number between data standardization and extreme customization. So between those two extremes, we're proposing 39 custom mappings. Those 39 custom mappings are being discussed at the moment with the associations, so we can lock that list and we can endorse it. I have a meeting tomorrow with the LMA, and the IUA was today, and it will be published through the engagement teams to all customers, because as everything in the market, the picture for every customer is a little bit complex and nuanced. Most of the customers have actually the three types of EDIs in their systems. So they have standard EDIs, they have chosen bespoke mappings, and they have left out mappings. And sometimes they have different systems that receive each of these three, and so the impact to each customer will be a little bit different. So we will communicate this week, because what our plan is in the next 2 weeks to close the list of bespoke EDI mappings that will be included in scope, so we can be ready for phase 1. Because the most limiting factor at the moment is time. If that list becomes 60 or 70, we won't be in time for phase 1 for bespoke mappings. If that list reduces, we'll be more in time. So I'm sure there will be more questions about it, but I wanted to give you a general update on those.
So recapping now, Alvaro, that sounds like publication of all the bespoke EDI information this week.
Yeah.
That'll be coming to you via the engagement teams, I think, first and foremost, and then we, the team here, and wider group will be available for discussion. And it sounds like we need fairly quick discussions in terms of impacts, feedback on the content of that, doesn't it?
Correct. Because again, on the nuances and complexities of the market, for example, we have carriers that receive the same EDI message mapped 4 different ways. And some of them are included, some of them are not included, so it's just can I use the first one or the second one? So each carrier and each broker will have a slightly different picture. On the second general update that we want to give on Prop Treaty is that our teams are working very hard. We will have a Prop Treaty product ready for phase 1 that offers the same service that we do today. So that's a statement from Velonetic. That product will not have the enhancements to Prop Treaty that are requested by the market, most importantly, EBOT for Prop Treaty. That won't be ready for phase 1. However, we're planning that for future phases. So at the moment, the statement is that for phase 1, there will be a Prop Treaty service that offers the same level of service that you have today in Fern. It will be available in DPSA through ANS submission, account and settlement submission, or IMR submissions, as those of you that are familiar with Prop Treaty.
So maybe if we pause there, we've got more info to offer, but maybe if we take questions on what Sean and Alvaro have covered.
Hi there, Steve Flint from Resolute Management Limited. It's to do with the customizations, the 39 customizations you mentioned, Alvaro. When I asked this question last time, we have a couple of instances where we're on some information that our engagement manager fed back to us. We have conversions to INT and conversions to ETS, and we don't know what those meant, and we were looking to you guys to see if you could help us. Does that ring any bells in among the 39
Yes.
you mentioned? Yep.
So
Brilliant.
INT is Interbridge version, so it's a slightly different format. Again, I won't go too geeky. It's EDI messages in IPSIDIC, and that's to the Interbridge version, so that's INT. ETS is a different mapping. If I remember from the 39, 2 or 3 of the INTs and ETS are included, so version 9 is included, and there's a few of them in ETS that are included. Some of them are left out. So there's a list. The 39 will include exactly what the map is. There is an exercise on each customer, and this, of course, includes Resolute and any other customer that receives EDI. You need to double check and confirm this. Some of these mapping specs are more than 10 years old, That doesn't necessarily mean that it's in our system, that you actually receive it or you actually use it. So you need to go to your system and double check that you are receiving ENT version 9, for example, so a LimpLim ENT version 9, and making sure that that's what you are receiving, because a lot of the systems have evolved in the last 10 years, and some of the documentation, either on our side or on your side, has not kept pace. So it's very important to confirm. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, thanks. And the second thing was to do with mandatory and optional selection of fields within EDIs, and whether that would continue to be supported, so where we don't necessarily take all of the fields within a message type.
So in mandatory and optional EDIs, it's actually a little bit, let's call it primitive. So in a pure EDI or standard EDI message, the only things that are mandatory are the header and the trailer. You don't have a lot of information inside that is mandatory. However, that's only for the message spec. We in Velonetic, when we process a premium or a claim or anything that goes into an EDI message, we have in our system a lot of mandatory fields that, of course, come to the EDI. That doesn't mean that the EDI message needs them, is that we have them because they're mandatory to sign a premium, for example, and they will be in the EDI. There is no change to those fields. So the mandatory fields that are in LITS, BOSH, and CLASS today will be in IPOS and ICOS in the future. So those fields will be in the EDI messages that you get. You should not get any changes in the EDI messages in terms of the data payload from the one that you get today.
I think just to add to that as well, it's always worth checking, and everybody's slightly different. The message will leave us in the state that it leaves us, whether it's a bespoke or a pure EDI. Your software may then change that message again. So it may not upload all the data, or it may change the data somehow in the way that it's presented to you. So it's still worth having that conversation with your vendor to make sure that they're getting the version that they still receive, regardless of changes that they may subsequently make. And the last point is, currently, for those of you that are familiar with XDH, which is the Exchange in Data Hub, which is, currently where all of the messages are sent out from. If you log into the XDH Hub, there is a form that you can actually further customize your messages through. That functionality will not be available in a DPSA.
Hi guys, Rich Birch from Verisk. Good to see you all. For a message type that doesn't fall into the category of the 39 or supported, will you be supporting vendors in the market with additional information around those extra customizations that XDH performs to help reconcile the outputs with what can be consumed?
So the answer is yes, Rich. I mean, we can support, but let me caveat that comment with some limitations. The first one is we have also, as everybody, very little information on some of the systems are, especially some of the old mappings. The newer mappings are, we have more information, but we have a little bit less information. So a lot of the times we have to end up looking at the code of the mainframe to actually look at what is being changed, as opposed to a document that we can share just as an EDI standard spec. So we can definitely share some of those, especially in the ones that have nuances. So we can have. We do have to prioritize standard EDIs and the chosen bespoke. So the third category would be left out bespoke. But yes, we can provide any help that we can, especially if we do have the information of the mapping, for example. There's no blocker to share that. The biggest limitation is actually the specification. Sometimes we don't even have it in our files. Yeah.
No, I completely get. We've had to do a similar code review ourselves, so we completely get that. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi there, John Clapham from Ascot. Quick question on your prop treaty statement. So that I get that for phase one, obviously it would just be EDI as it is today, same as the other contract types. But for phase two, will you look to introduce that on EBOT? Because otherwise we'll be a scenario where we have EDI and EBOT going in a digital mode.
I'm afraid that for phase 2, you won't have e-bots for treaties. They won't be available. And I understand that that is a constraint for a lot of our customers, because of course some of our customers can only adopt e-bot as all business types. I cannot divide open market from treaties, from DA, for example, or line slips. I have to adopt all of them at the same time. Prop treaty, so we're working to see when, so we definitely have already the epics and the stories ready, and we're working with our partners, DXC, to get you a date for e-bot for treaties, because we understand that that's what the market has asked for the last years, and we are completely aware of this. However, it is not at the moment for a phase 2 deliverable. It will be a little bit later, yeah.
That will be that adoption bit.
Correct, yeah. We understand that, yeah.
Okay, so if there's no more questions on what the guys have covered so far, maybe we'll just move down the list. So should we talk, Sean talked a little bit around timeline and readiness, and we can probably bring that to life just in a little bit more. So just building on what Sean said, we get the question all the time, you're going to be ready? And the answer to that is we look at that from a few different lenses. From a build perspective, I mean, guys, anything that you add, but build is on track, scheduled for delivery sort of between January, February, March, isn't it?
Yep. Phase 1, yep.
So there's not a great deal in terms of build readiness. I can tell you that the amount of governance, the amount of KPI measurement, the amount of work and control that we have over the top of build is significant, as you imagine. But that major milestone, I think we're all feeling quite confident for. And then you take a step back from that and you sort of look at what needs to continue from build. You then move straight into the adoption discussion, which is from build completion into testing, into training, and then into the onboarding and support. So we at this time have not given the sort of specific and exact details of how that plan will hang together. And our next event is scheduled for December the 11th. So December the 11th is when we're planning to share the specifics on all of that will come together. What you can expect from us in terms of support, specifics on milestones, specifics on timelines, and essentially building on the information that's contained within the adoption guide right now. But we'll give you all that at our next event, which is on December the 11th. So we'll have a really good story to share with you at that point. Obviously, we can take follow-up Q&As and we can bring to life in detail. Now, my hope, and Bob, feel free to jump in, is that what that will give you is a very detailed view of how the build completion right through to launch timescale will look, what that means for your firm, where you've got specific time windows, where you've got to complete training, where you've got to complete testing, where your firm needs to be to make sure it's ready for July 1st. That journey will be different for everyone, obviously lots of similarities, but I think from the information that we're sort of very close to sharing with you, that will bring to life that final piece of the jigsaw, how we go from build completion to actually adoption and launch.
And we're definitely putting together the detail for that, and if you recall from the last event we showed 3 types of readiness I would say we're looking at, which is technical readiness, which you just mentioned, operational readiness, and then market readiness. The first 2 dimensions are really Velinetic. And so the readiness and the tools for readiness that the market will have will actually be essentially what we're going through in the operational readiness phase within Velinetic itself. So a lot of the things that you'll see December 11th are things that we are actually going through ourselves as an entity, which then you'll be able to use as well.
The final piece I'd just add before we move on to the next topic, just in terms of how we're going to track readiness and where you're up to. So sort of from the, say if I said the last year, but I suppose it extends further back from that, our engagement has probably started in terms of sharing information, making people aware what's happening in the program, and has now morphed through to actually there's action required on your side. So over the next few weeks, we take that to the next step where we do a more formal measurement of readiness. So the engagement team through this month, and we'll be talking about again in more detail on December 11th, we'll be launching our adoption and readiness tracker for the market. And essentially what that will be for every single managing agent, every single carrier, every single broker in the market, and vendor as well actually, an assessment that will be run by our engagement team about your level of readiness. So you've participated, and thank you very much for the feedback that you've provided to us in our quarterly surveys. Essentially, it's just ratcheting that up so we have a detailed view of where your firm is at. So that will be sort of, it's a set of questions which is pretty lengthy. We don't ask them all every month. They kind of build into each other through November, through December, through January. Our hope will be that in January we'd have the first cut of data so we can see where the market is. Completion of that tracker, I'd sort of say we had a really good conversation. I can see Rob sitting in the audience there. We had a really good conversation with the LMA board a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about that it would be a reasonably involved process to complete. And what I mean by that is, it's not like there's hundreds of questions to complete every month. What I mean is, it will be a formal statement of where your firm is at. So actually it's something that might require a little bit more thought, it might require a little bit more input, it might need to go through, depending on your structure, 1, 2, many pairs of hands before you can provide a sort of clear message on where your firm's at. But just to let you know, that's a process that we'll be running. And then there'll be a flip side of that coin with our vendor community. Obviously a slightly different set of questions, slightly different set of controls, but the same thing, just to sort of be clear where you're up to, if you've got concerns about particular clients, particular piece of functionality. So we can sort of say, in any given time, once we get into the new year, we know where the market is at, we know where your firm is at. And that's all from the perspective of where we need to provide support, by the way. You know, so it's not necessarily, and it's not something that we would publish, it's not something that would be in the public domain, it's strictly for our internal use to know, you know, if anyone else needs support or we've got work to do. So that's probably final points on timelines and readiness. I'll pause there just in case there is any questions, and we'll move on if there isn't.
Hi, Vikas from DocuSoft. Just from a claims perspective, you talk about build. Do you have timelines for write-back and CWT in terms of build and in terms of the specs for those as well? I know you've issued specs for write-back and CWTs, but they just rebranded specs as it stands. There's nothing new in them. So do you have a view of, from claims perspective, what the build timelines are, the spec timelines are as well?
So what we're doing at the moment, Vikas, is we're working with the Vanguard group. So they will be the first, and you know, you've got customers that are part of that group. They will be the first people to test anything, including write-back. And what we're trying to do at the moment is a bit of a puzzle, because obviously we have write-back affects a couple of component parts of the build. So for example, in ICOS, the write-back component is built. It's ready to go. But we don't have the extraction piece from the notifications, the notification application to actually take out the message and send it to ASG. And then there's an ASG dependency for them to actually collate and form the message. So there's a bit of a train in terms of all those three things need to be ready. So what we're trying to do at the moment is look at build completion dates for all of the things that affect all of these pathways. So CWT is one, EDIs on an individual message is another, settlement. And once we know the build completion date for the final piece of that puzzle, after a week of UAT, that will then be the date that particular component part or functionality can be tested. So we're working on doing that at the moment. That's something that we're hoping to complete probably by the end of the month, so it's ready to go come the new year. So it's kind of work in progress at the moment.
There's another question down here, I think, Lisa.
Hi, Afi Ogun from Marsh. I know, probably a bit premature question. I know the emphasis on phase 1 at the moment, but is anybody looking at phase 2? What happens beyond phase 2, like delivery? Because I'm sort of trying to put together like a route map for my team, so a tech team, and the world seems to end at phase 2, and we need to start planning for what happens afterwards. Is there anybody looking at that, or is that just too early?
So just let me clarify, so I understand the exact question. When you say sort of post phase 2, are you sort of what happens after like October next year? Is that your question?
Because you've got phase 2 go live on your roadmap, and you've got like a 24-month adoption period, but that's just like a blank piece of paper. Is there anybody thinking about that, or do you have any?
Well, of course, that'll be simple for Marsh, because in month 1 of the 24 months, you'll be adopting, so that will make life significantly easier for all of us. Yeah. That's the way I understood it. Admit it, that please.
Simple answer on that one is yes, we are looking at, we referred to it as, it's got a couple of names, sequence 6, day 2 requirements. So we are looking at what needs to be followed on. This is, and I think I emphasized this at the last get together also, is this is a product, it's not a project, so it will evolve over time. So we'll look at things that we've taken out of scope of this release to hit the timelines, make them the fast follow items first, and then we'll work with the wider community to go, what is important, what adds the most business value to actually go deliver next. So yes, in short, we are looking at it. Nothing formed concrete yet, but we are starting to form ideas about what the next priority is.
Yeah, so I think it's a clear kind of bifurcation of path. So obviously there's still an enormous amount of work to do in that adoption window. You know, depending on where you sit in the market, that for your firm could be a small to very, very complex undertaking. We as a group, from a project and a Velonetic perspective, will be leaning in to support that. And then exactly as Ruan said, you know, what's being delivered in 2024 is our baseline. You know, Bob described it at the event as essentially, think of it as iPhone 1 is where we're going to deliver. And then the other stream of activity is where does the continued evolution of that baseline offering then move from. So, you know, I think probably there's some really interesting discussions about what gets included, how we evolve the tech from that point. I think those would be at the highest level what the activity over that period would be.
And I think there's probably for Marsh, probably 3 vectors where you can really, you know, have an exchange of information. That one would be the design office, which maybe you mentioned a little bit about that, Alvaro. There's the 3-in-a-box conversations that also take place, which Alan, I think, leads. And then we have, Marsh is also a part of Vanguard, and which Ray Johnston is leading day to day. And that's where we're already in discussion, getting feedback, exchanging ideas with Vanguard on phase 2 and what phase 2 probably should involve, and beyond phase 2, let's say.
Let me give a 2-minute update on the design office. That's important for the whole market. So again, Velonetic and Blueprint 2, we see this as the first step, and we see this as an iterative product or suite of products that will be evolving over time. And one of the things that we have established in the past few months is we have a new function within Velonetic called the design office that will oversee and manage the priority setting. There's tons of requests. There's a write-back splitter, there's a CDR for DA coming, there's so many requests. So we need to prioritize with the market what are the most important things that need to be built post phase 2. So those sequences 6, 7, and 8, and 9. What is the order of the sequences? What are the most important things for the market? Well, you will get most benefit out. So we are opening this process that previously was a little bit opaque or not very mature. Now we have put in place, it's going through internal approval, but we're putting in place a governance process on how to prioritize the new requests that will come post phase 2. And that means that all market participants will have a way to influence that, either through the market advisory groups or through the associations, through different channels. But that way, that priority, and it's very public as well, because the treaties community doesn't see what the open market premiums community or what the lowers community, you know, and then of course they have competing requests because they're all pulling from the same capacity bucket. So that will be published this year. We're just going through the final approval.
Okay, we'll move on. So there was quite a few questions which came in around vendor readiness. They were in fact sort of the same question and all centered on bespoke EDIs. So Alvaro's update from earlier on. So bespoke EDIs, all the information that you require will be published this week. Included EDIs which are going to be built as part of what Velonetic deliver. The list of areas which are not going to be supported. I suppose that will give every firm and every vendor an opportunity to look at that list and understand sort of downstream impacts of what that means for you. And then what we'll have over the next sort of 2 or 3 weeks, probably a month, I would say, via the engagement team, we can get a sense from your firm and from your vendor what that means. So I think I wasn't intended to sort of do a laundry list of every question per vendor today. We wanted to call it out there because we got that question maybe 9 or 10 times from different parties. It specifically was around bespoke EDI. and then what that meant for them, and then by definition by vendors. So that one, I guess, feel free to ask us any more questions on Bespoke EDI right now, but we'll be publishing all the information that's standing on that this week. We should maybe talk a little bit about training and testing. Testing, I think, is probably one a subject that has come up a lot. So, I mean, guys, if I can maybe hand over to you, you can. I know you've sort of collaborated a lot of the questions together, haven't you? You can give some intro, and then we can open up to questions on testing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first point I would make is, so there's integration testing, so vendors can do that now. When it comes, and then there's sort of two elements of, do you want to cover Vanguard? But before you do that, I'll get ready to do it. There's a lot around, what if I'm not a Vanguard member? How do I test if I've got, excuse me, a bespoke scenario that I want to put through? So from the 1st of April to the end of June, that will be your window for ad hoc customer testing. So vendors cannot directly come to us on their own. They have to come to us via a client. So they will be looking for you to sort of come to us and start that process rolling, and we can issue with credentials in order to do that. That testing is self-led. So you might have your individual scripts that you've run from previous upgrades. You might want to get a team thinking about what you want to test now if you've got specific bespoke stuff. All of the Vanguard outputs will be available to you. So you will be able to see all of the scenarios that were tested, what the outcome was, whether it resulted in defects, whether we fixed the defects, all that kind of stuff. All that data will be available to you as the testing happens. So you can almost say, well, actually, 50% of my sort of ad hoc, 50% of my BAU stuff has been tested. I'm not specifically interested in that, but I have a particularly big aviation book, or I do a lot of vertical placements, I want to test that. So you can start to actually get your teams looking at areas of testing, what's important to you, so that when you engage your vendors, you don't have to do all that sort of homework before you can get going. Can you give us a quick update on Vanguard?
Ray, do you mind talking a little bit about Vanguard, what the structure looks like, what we're going to be doing?
From Mike, right?
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Thank you. So Vanguard is, we are going through all of the detailed processes to compare them to the different services that will be available to the market. We will be publishing that to Vanguard members later on this month, and then we'll be going through all of those test scenarios, business scenarios with them, starting from January, maybe February next year. As Sean has quite rightly said, we'll be sharing all of that output with all of you and comparing the coverage of that against the MAT that's been done previously to make sure that we haven't missed any large areas, or even if we find an area that's been missed that nobody wants to test, then we've got a really interesting question to answer on that as well. We'll be able to provide all of that to you prior to your testing, and then I would suggest that you would want to have your own confidence building tests, and then any specifics you might want to do that's outside the scope of Vanguard, plus the sequence UAT that's done by Velinetic.
And just to remind everybody, Vanguard consists of just under 30 now carriers and brokers. So we have quite a wide range of businesses, specialities, tech covering about as many scenarios as we can hope to have in the market.
So, Bob, can you bring to life just some details regarding training, and then we can, once we've sort of talked a little bit about testing and training, we can maybe go to the audience and take some questions.
Yeah, so as I said, we published the first set of training materials November 1st, so just under a week ago. So go on the Velinetic site, take a look at that, and it's really taking you through the steps of what do we think you'll need to cover, how to cover that, and what we think you'll probably be able to disregard moving forward in terms of processes and different types of activities in your business. We'll be updating that on a regular basis, so its first iteration went out last week. We'll be updating that as we go, providing more and more information, especially as we start to tie it to the build, as that starts to continue to come through on an agile basis as well. And then ultimately we'll be making what I would say the final set of materials available excuse me, at the end of Q1 next year, so should provide sufficient time for the training that needs to take place before the July 1st cutover. Again, it's relatively straightforward what needs to happen given the types of changes that we're going to be facing in terms of essentially portals and URLs, I think.
Yeah, I think probably the longest pole in the tent from a training perspective is those portals. There'll be a very, very large community of people who are using today's tools or indeed are not using those tools directly. They're using them through different software. So I think that's probably the sort of key area from a training perspective. Certainly some of the larger firms that have got outsourced operations, there'll be a lot of work to do about refinements of SOWs and things like that. The training materials will allow that to happen, won't they?
Indeed, yeah, and we're also, right now, I think again, given the types of changes that are coming, should be pretty much self-service, but we are looking at the possibility of having optional support available as well, so that's maybe something where if we put a commercial wrap around it, we can come and train your trainers, those types of things, and then help you in terms of cascading that through your organization.
I think in terms of quantity as well, just thinking about what's being replaced, so it's really only the claims portals that are changing, so the IMR portal will remain as it is today. So your ANS uploads and the way that you submit premiums via the IMR portal is going to be completely unchanged, so that really won't require any retraining. Obviously class is going, so when you do your claim submissions you'll no longer be using class, and that will be replaced by a new ICOS portal. So I think claims is probably more affected on the portal side than the premium side of stuff. And then there will be new laws portals as well for those of you that do outward reinsurance. We're trying to keep the portals as intuitive as possible, so that actually, I'm not a claims processor, but I've managed to create a claim in ICOS. I don't know how good the data is, but I've managed to navigate it. So hopefully we've made it kind of as intuitive as possible. But yeah, as Bob said, there'll be material and there'll be support available for those that you need it.
Okay, so from a training perspective, portal launched, initial materials out there, those will be built on over the coming months and we'll link back to everything that's delivered in build and give your teams the opportunity to see how all the new technology works, how the portals work, and have a read on changes to current process to future. From a testing perspective, I mean, we could probably talk more about it, but there's just so much detail, isn't there? For a meeting like this, just summarise that internal to the build, just a huge amount of testing taking place to actually validate the technology. So in terms of what is built, what comes out of test, an enormous amount of work done. And then I suppose from there, there's a couple of lenses on it. There's the Vanguard lens, so what have the Vanguard participants seen and fed back? What do you want to look at in the testing that's completed by the Velinetic team? Some of that you'll want to get comfort that a particular area has been tested. Some of that you want to get assurance for your firm that something specific to your firm is working. And then of course you want to get your hands dirty on some stuff. So that'll be running transactions into the machine, partnering with brokers and underwriters to actually ensure that you can take data all the way through. So the full testing journey is covered. Is there anything you wanted to say about what's actually taking place in build? Because it's very easy to gloss over that, but it's just such an enormous undertaking.
So from a build perspective, we do fairly standard testing from a build perspective. The first layer of testing we do, so we run Agile for those that don't know. First level of testing is unit testing, so every 2 weeks we run our unit tests off the back of the new code that we built, and also build up our regression pack at that point and run the regression pack against the existing build to make sure we haven't broken anything. So you've got unit testing. That's our first pack that we put together. We then use that pack and enhance that pack to build what's called the system test pack, and that tests a bit more of the end-to-end functionality, not just the actual unit of code that was written. Once we've done system testing, we also then get into what we call system integration testing, and that's testing that ICOS is working with IPOS, is working with IROS, is working with notification, so all the systems are actually integrating together to give you the end-to-end solution. That also has an automated regression test pack that we run every single time we do our integration testing. At that point, we hand it across to what's called user acceptance testing. In this case, our users are defined as Velinetic. Velinetic have a team that then pick that up, and they run also, again, predefined automated tests against that solution, and they also then do all the manual testing against that solution from a user perspective to give us whether we've passed our user acceptance testing threshold. It's at that point, once we get through that gate, that you go into the Vanguard area, and we have spoken quite a bit about Vanguard and about Vanguard. So we have that as our route to live. So route to live is unit test, system integration test, user acceptance test. I didn't cover non-functional testing, but that sits at the user acceptance test level also. So we do NFT. Once we get through those passes, we hand it off to Vanguard. From Vanguard, it'll go pre-prod, production.
And I think what's really important and what enables us to produce this code in such small segments is the regression packs. So every time new code is deployed, the regression pack is updated and we can run it across the whole code set in 30 seconds to make sure, as Ruben said, that that recent deployment of code hasn't broken anything. So whereas in Waterfall we had to wait, release all the code together and then test end to end, we can incrementally release code because we can run a 30-second test pack over it to make sure that it all still behaves as it did.
Not quite 30 seconds,
Well,
but yeah,
sorry.
takes a bit longer than that to run. And just to give a metric, Chris asked me to download the test pack for UAT this morning, and the UAT automated pack is sitting at 1,800, 300 or 800, I can't remember, one or the other tests at the moment. So yeah, just to give you a volume of what our automation tests look like at this point in time.
So we'll pause there, but questions on training and testing?
There we go.
Castle as a leader, how are you envisaging test data to be produced when we're doing our market acceptance testing? So for instance, at Aviva, we don't have an internal broker, so we don't have users that would go on and create us data. How will that work?
So, if you're using the self-serve option, the one that is free for everybody, you will be given a broker number. So you will be given a broker number so you can actually, let's say that you want to test a claim query. So you can create the claim as a broker. We can provide the training guides as a broker. It shouldn't be too much of a problem, but you will have to be both areas. So you will have to play broker and carrier, even if you just do it just with the mandatory fields, just to get it over the board and actually test that. However, we are discussing a level above self-service pure and a level below Vanguard, because Vanguard is fully managed self-service, something that we're calling self-service plus. That is an offering from Velonetic where with some resources from our team, and of course it would be a paid offer, but we can offer a bit more help. So for example, data sets, or let's say that you have a process that has 3 personas as 7 steps, and Aviva is only in charge of 4 steps, but you want somebody else to perform the other 3 steps, then we can provide some help either by putting a user on the other side of your testing cycle, or actually automating your testing cycle, the part that's not yours of your testing cycle. So again, on a claim query, let's say that you send the original query and we automate the response as a broker, and you just get it immediately, and then you can test your side. That's still in the works. We will provide more information on the 11th of December event, because let's call it a plus service, something that we can provide a bit more hand-holding. Yeah. So you will have those 3 options. Yeah. Important to note as well on that one, the environment that we will be using for Vanguard, self-service, and self-service plus will be the same. So there's an opportunity for market participants that have friendly brokers or friendly carriers. If you want to coordinate your cycles, you will be on the same environment. So you could test with people that are on the same, let's say that you have 2 carriers and a broker that are on the self-serve, pure self-serve, independent self-serve path, and they just coordinate, well, that now your question is fully answered, and actually you have more of a real life, but because you will be operating on the same environment, so you will have access. So if a broker submits a claim to your test user, you will see that claim, and then you will be able to respond. So you wouldn't be isolated from anybody else in the market. Everybody will be operating on the same environment.
Hey guys, Ian, Rich First. I wouldn't be too much of an ask this. So market message testing, specifically now, this has been an area for us we've identified for everyone as being almost an order of magnitude higher degree of regression risk, because what's the value of a market portal if you can't take what's in there into your own systems? So one, are Vanguard participants going to be testing that message consumption and notifications before the rest of the market? And two, from April through to June, are you going to be entertaining fixes? How will that prioritization process work?
Yeah, that's good. So I'll start with the fixes, and then you can. So I'll start with the fixes. Any defect found by any of the testing avenues, be it Vanguard, being UAT, being self-service, let's say that Aviva found the defect and our write-back query didn't work, will follow the same funnel. So we have an established funnel of defects at the moment. So they get, there's an investigation by the test team, then they get to the product owner to actually, is this a defect or if it's a feature, as joked normally in the tech world, and then establishing the severity of this defect, because that's the most important thing. So is this a priority one? Does it block? Is it more of a, I want the screen to be green and it's light green, so it doesn't affect, it doesn't affect. So the severity from 1 to 4 is established, and that gives in to the priority of the defect resolution. Because let's say that a battery of tests from self-service and Vanguard came out and we found 75 defects. Out of those, 30 are P1s. Then those would go into the next sprint of build, because those are the most important ones. And then we would issue a release of software that fixes defects 1 to 30. You can now come and retest whatever you were doing before for all of those communities that were affected, again, Vanguard, or customer self-service. So on the defects, it will be the same funnel in terms of process and governance for all defects coming. So that means that the window, even the window before April to June, so the window before any defects raised, even by our UAT teams, they go through the same conveyor belt.
And that includes where resolution lies in the gateway function as well.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, because each API or each or ICOS or every portal will have a version number. So you will have on 1.1554, and then let's say we issue a fix, and then we will communicate to everybody that is on that environment, hey, we issued a fix API on ASG EBOT. Entry is now 1.153. So now you can upgrade to that version and then get the new test in. So, yeah. On the other question?
On our Vanguard testing message outputs, yes. So that's probably the hardest thing for us to coordinate, because really for a message to be useful, it really needs to go through from an end-to-end perspective and have real data put into the beginning of it. We haven't worked out a way to do dual run, because the amount of data that we would have to put into the new system is too big, and obviously the technicians that we would need to support it isn't really manageable. That was one of the questions that we were asked. If the environment could be ready in July, can we dual run? From a technical perspective, yes. Operationally, we couldn't support that. I mean, we have over 2,000 people offshore, and if we were trying to replicate that twice over, it'd be very expensive for you all. But yes, they will be part of their remit is to test message outputs.
Hi, it's John Earl from Charles Taylor. 2 questions from me. Who's got final sign-off that testing's been successfully completed? So essentially performing the role that Limos have done in the past. So that's my first question.
Yeah. So for the first 2 gates, so technical and operational, is Velonetic. So we with DXC, we make sure that the machine that we're building is up to what we set. And then our operations in Velonetic work for it. So those 2 are fully ours.
We're working through the assurance framework now in combination with LMA, IOA, LIBA, Lloyd's as well, in terms of what that final sign-off will look like. So.
Expectation levels will play a role in that.
Yeah.
Okay, second question is around sort of performance testing. How are you doing sort of volume testing on and replicating the message volumes that are going to be going through the new infrastructure? Because in the past, to be honest with you, DXC haven't been very good at, say, the IMR rollout. After that, the performance of the messaging especially was pretty poor. how are you going to ensure that doesn't happen?
We're doing automated performance testing. Now that we've finally got access to actual production-like data, we should be able to up that performance testing using the production-like data that we've just got out the systems over the weekend. And we will be releasing to the market the results. So yeah, we'll be very transparent on that, on how we've tested it and the results of those tests.
Something very important, it's the two biggest constraints that we had compared to previous projects was that on previous projects, such as the IMR, the hardware and some of the versions of the software used in the hardware on the mainframe are fairly old. It depends on which of the applications, but there was huge constraints on those, so performance is greatly affected. In the new world, we are in AWS and we're using the latest software stack, so that means that performance should not be an issue. Nevertheless, the testing is being done that way, but those constraints that we had before are not longer there in the new platform, so it shouldn't be a red area or a minefield this time around.
Yeah, we'll still test performance, but the backstop on the back of performance, if you get another peak through that we didn't envisage, is auto scale, and we'll be in the position to auto scale.
Hi, Steve Flint again from Resolute. Just in terms of the self-led testing from April onwards, where you've described that everybody effectively is then able to go into that single environment and conduct their own testing, is there any need for, or will there be any kind of constraints, guidelines, guardrails about how those firms conduct that testing to avoid anybody kind of getting mixed up or impinging on other people's testing?
Yes, there definitely will. We will publish those during what's left of 2023. So there definitely will, because there's not only a little bit of coordination, because everybody might be on different cycles. You might be testing something this week, and another participant might be testing something on another week. But there, as with any test environment, there will also be data purges. So a lot of the times you run the test and you need the database to be reset to 0 to run them again. So all of that will be coordinated across the different groups. Most likely we'll put some kind of website where you get the latest updates. As well as sometimes you might have services that are down because we're implementing fixes. So, hey, don't test this weekend because we are, upgrading ICOS to the latest version or something. So yes, there is definitely coordination and limitations on, it's not a free-for-all, there would be some coordination on those, yes.
Every time I think we can move on, one more hand goes up.
Hi, Paul Evans from Notre Dame. Two questions. So first of all, around CDR validation, around particularly things like taxes, etc. We'll be able to test those. When can we test them? When will we know what the results are for the validation? And the second question is regarding phase 2 in scope, out of scope. From a submission point of view, if there are certain types that are out of scope, is it still expected to submit LPANs, or will it be possible to submit EBOC transmissions for everything, and then you'll pick those up and process them regardless?
Okay, I can answer both, yeah. So on your CDR question, so CDR validations, we're going to have a sandbox environment or a testing environment with a CDR submission API ready by the end of January that our Vanguard members can start testing. That will have some of the validations, so all the L3s and some of the L4 validations. In terms of tax, I will have to come back to you because some of them will be included, but some of them not. There's a side note on the tax validation on Gateway that it's important for the market to know. The original design of the digital gateway had a call to an external tax validator. This was chosen as Avalara. I don't know if you were familiar with that RFI about a year and something back. The problem is that Avalara has now pulled out of the insurance market, so there is no digital product where we can actually send that information to get some information back. So there is some of the tax validation that at the moment is at the end of phase 2, but most likely won't have an external product that can have it. There's not a similar product. We're working with TMF and others to see if we can do something with them, but at the moment it is a risk. So in tax validation, it's because some areas we do inside the digital gateway, some areas we were expecting a third party such as Avalara to do them. On your second question about what is in scope for eBot on phase 2. So definitely the things that are not in scope for eBot for phase 2, you as a broker will need to send an LPAN. So there won't be, let's call it an eBot PDF function or something like that. That means that yes, there is a constraint that those things that are out of scope for phase 2 on eBot will have an impact on adoption, just as we were discussing with Ascot. So the main business types that are not in scope for phase 2 eBot are treaties, delegated authority, and bulking line slips. Those are the three main ones that will still need to be submitted via LPAN. Yeah.
What about vertical placements and binary?
Vertical placements is good.
So although they're out of scope for CDR, you can
They're in
still
scope for
submit
eBot,
an eBot. We don't need, so in the event where we get an eBot and there's no CDR present, we revert to using an MRC.
Yeah.
So there's a slightly heavier manual intervention on our side, but you can submit an eBot. Yeah.
I was going to say, I know that you're working at least with one of the Vanguard brokers. I don't know if you're working with other companies as well, maybe one other one. You know, you can probably flex and test some of the things that you want early through Vanguard, through those clients.
Simon Jordan, DXC. So a follow-up on the self-testing. In the real world, it's going to be Velonetic agreeing or querying transactions on behalf of carriers. Will they be doing that during the self-testing? And if not, how will that work?
If it's in the independent, yes, we will provide a username and password as a Velonetic technician. So if it's independent, again, it will be hands-off from us. On the plus side, back to the question to Aviva, to the response to Aviva, we can provide extra, but this would be a paid service. On the Vanguard side is fully managed. So you have fully Velonetic technicians that actually perform that function. So basically you have those three levels. It's not, I know it sounds a little bit daunting. You don't need to learn how to be a technician in order to just get into the portal and answer or respond to a query. So it would be fairly minimum, but yes, it would need to be done by the self-service party, all personas, yes.
I think we're there on testing and training. So the final area, Bob, you've touched on it already just in terms of DPSA. Was there any other info you wanted to share with the team? Maybe would be worthwhile just talk a little bit about timeline on DPSA.
Yeah, timeline again. So
key part of what we're doing.
Yeah, sorry. Timeline again is we released the draft full T's and C's service catalog. Rob, keep me honest here. We've got, I think, the service description still coming in this week or next week for the customer panel to work through. The actual pricing coming out also middle of this month to then sit down with the associations and work through that and negotiate through that. And then releasing, assuming we get all that finished up by the end of this month, we'll be really just crossing T's and dotting I's through the month of December, and then making available the full DPSA to the markets in the first half of January as well. We appreciate each of the companies that are going to be signing have governance that they need to go through, and it's going to be a combination of obviously having their own lawyers and operational teams pouring through the documents, then also going through the approvals. So what we plan to do is be spending some time with your C-suite in advance, probably sometime in December, to let them know actually what's coming so they can start to prepare their companies internally for the governance aspect, and so that we can move as quickly as possible. We're anticipating it, say, 2-3 month time frame for some questions to come back. If we miss something fundamental, then we'll obviously have to fix that. Hopefully we haven't been that so I say slack in terms of what we're doing. I doubt it, given all the attention we've been giving it. And then we'd like to get that signed by the end of April, so then we can, by April, so that we can then also open up the test environment and other things to you, onboarding, support and services, so that this way we can make sure that we've got the cutover in time for July 1st. Any questions beyond that?
Well, listen, if there's no questions for Bob, let's just throw questions to the floor on any topic, anything that we've covered today, or anything that's relevant that you wanted to ask today.
Hi, this is Anuj from Beasley. My question is around delegated authority space, and I know that as a scope item is still being discussed. In light of the recent DDM sort of decisions, what's the perceived impact that the program sees on itself? And also in terms of the market, obviously there's options being explored now. With the DS strategy being defined or being discussed, is there a renewed sort of emphasis on building on that so the market can be informed and the solution options are more sort of future-proofed or forward-looking?
Yeah.
So,
you want to take the what's in scope now, and then I'll take about the strategy?
Yeah, well, so we've deliberately kept it at a very skinny scope for that reason. So we know that the LMA groups have got, theirs ongoing, and we've got the strategy piece going. So we've deliberately kept it skinny so that we're not overbuilding, because actually it's sometimes harder to retract stuff like that. So we're going to build to the parameters that we have today, and then the plan is that once the strategy, and I'll talk about it a bit more, once that's a bit more understood, we can then start looking at integration pieces. So we know that DCOM is out there, we know that there are other sources of information, and that we've got computable contracts coming in. So there's lots of things that could influence the DA space. Hence we've deliberately kept our scope small for the time being, with a view in the future to then grow it to complement the additional sort of market, what should we call them, initiatives, I guess, that are ongoing at the moment.
So let me give a little bit of color on the future on that. So as you all might know, on delegated authority, we in Velonetic, we only process and we are only owners of the signing and settlement piece of delegated authority. However, the delegated authority end-to-end process is this big. It has Atlas, DCOM, DDM, DAM, FCP. There's all of these applications that some of them talk to each other, some of them don't talk to each other. Sometimes you're double keying, and there is no end-to-end cohesive service that goes through them. So at the moment for phase one, we're tackling the part that we own, signing and settlement, and so we kept it to some benefits there. However, we're working with the BP2 team and with the associations, especially the LMA, where there's some very strong views about the future, computable contracts, CDR for DA, and actually consolidating this fragmented landscape that at the moment you have, because you do have a bit here, a bit here, a bit here, a bit here, but they don't seem to flow together. There is a view to have a strategy, so post phase two, we can start fixing some of that, and actually becomes a very easy family of services to follow through, and that they all talk to each other, and we avoid any double keying that it's happening today. That's not for phase one or two, it's post phase, but it's something that we're looking at right now, because there will be the same as CDR for open market. There's a moment where as soon as you establish the digital standard, the hub, then all the products can gravitate as satellites towards this hub. And we expect that to happen with CDR for DA in the future, and also computable contracts. So we can have a digital core, and then we can put all the products on top of it following that. So that's in progress. There's no dates, there's no plan yet. There's some people working on it, yes.
One at the back.
No trick questions.
Hi. Two questions on claims again. So the first one on vendor readiness. So in the September session, you mentioned vendors reach out to ASG to kind of look at connectivity and testing around it. So we did reach out to ASG. So from a write-back perspective, we were told ASG is still not ready to offer any environments to test. They only have environments for eCard, eBody, card messaging. Is there a view on when we can actually, we obviously want to preempt any issues in connectivity for write-back. So what's the view on write-back connectivity testing through ASG?
Just want to clarify, what we mentioned in the September event is connectivity to the gateway, not actual testing of the messages. So we said chat to ASG to connect to the...
connectivity. So it's SOAP message connectivity, because obviously eCard, eBody is REST API. So we still want to test SOAP message connectivity, not the actual message, which is still not available through ASG as it stands. So we just need a view of when we can do that.
Let me take that one away and chat to ASG about that and feedback on that. I'll take that as a takeaway. I can't give you a date off the top of my head.
Thanks. And the second question is parallel UCRs. I know, Sean, we've had a couple of conversations around them. Is there more information around what happens to parallel UCRs? We're very conscious that we can't accommodate anything significant for phase 1, because anything significant in the way parallel UCRs are going to work is just not going to be possible for us to accommodate.
It's a piece of analysis we need to undertake. So at the moment, my understanding is that you recognise a parallel UCR because basically the message contains 2 UCRs. It has the parallel and then it refers to the original UCR, and that's how you know. That isn't going to happen in future. So that secondary parallel UCR won't exist. Everything will sit under a primary UCR. So we need to work out a way of identifying where something is a fee. Well, first of all, whether it needs to be recognised separate, and that might be for reserving or whatever else. But I think that's one of the things that we need to have a 3-in-a-box session on, to work out the data we're not providing you and what the impact of that is. And if the impact is such that we need to give you something instead, then we can look at that.
There's one more question down here, I think.
Neil Cooper, broker engagement in Lloyds. Just coming back to the tax point, the tax lead in Lloyds is looking at another entity that's building out this capability of doing the taxes. And I'm also aware that a few brokers are looking at it as well. So whilst Avalaro, which isn't Alvaro's sister, has gone, it's not just the Lloyds market, it's to the whole of the world. So they have disappeared. It wasn't something we did. So they've gone. But there is this new entity that's coming in, and they're looking at that.
By the way, those things are all one and the same. So the conversation with the Lloyds tax team is the same conversation with Alvaro. So wherever we land on a solution, it will be dovetailed in through what we offer from Lloyds and a Valnetic perspective. Any final questions? I think we're there. Well, listen, all that remains to say is thank you to the Valnetic team for sharing so much information. Thank you to you for coming along today. If you do think of something when you've left the room, if there is something burning your firm, please let us know. Please let your engagement partners know. We're here to help. Thank you very much.
Thank you.